you ever felt like asking for help at work was a sign of weakness? Or maybe you've been exhausted but felt you had to push through without support. What if asking for help was actually a strength, one that could transform your career and well being? Welcome to Beyond Chronic Burnout. I'm Carol Jean Whittington, your Chief Wellbeing Officer and lead researcher here at Whittington Wellbeing. This show is for professionals seeking their best life, neurodivergent and disabled individuals, and anyone navigating high stress and high demand environments who are ready to go beyond burnout and uncover sustainable energy and fulfillment with a dose of play and joy. Unlike other burnout podcasts, we dive deep into real solutions with a neuro-inclusive lens that works for you. We're not just talking theory here. We're bringing you research-backed insights, practical tools, and conversations that honor the unique challenges we face in a fast-paced world without sugarcoating it. Today, we have a very special guest in this live episode in celebration of World Kindness Day. And we're inviting you to join the conversation right here in the chat. Our guest today is someone who understands the importance of kindness to oneself, especially in professional spaces. He's an internationally recognized recruiter and professional speaker known for his powerful storytelling and dynamic style. Joining us live today is Dan Roth. Dan has carved out a reputation in the recruiting world, not only for his insights into the hiring process, but also for his commitment to normalizing discussions around mental health in the workplace. Today, he'll be sharing his personal journey from trials to triumphs and all of the things in between, and how he's learned to manage anxiety, depression, and burnout, all while embracing self-care as he's navigated his career transitions and growth. In this conversation, we're covering so much ground, and I'm so excited that you're here today. We'll talk about what it really means to belong in professional settings, why every challenge has a beginning, middle, and end, and how to find resilience and that flexibility even during career pivots. We'll discuss the power of saying no, that two-letter word we don't use nearly enough when it comes to accepting help, and how you can normalize anxiety, depression, and asking for help in your own professional journey. And because today's episode is live, we're really excited to take your questions. So don't be shy. Jump into the chat, share your thoughts, and let us know what resonates with you, my friend. We'll have time at the end for a live Q&A and dive even deeper into these essential topics. Whether you're a job seeker, an HR professional, or simply navigating the ups and downs of your career, this conversation is packed with practical advice to help you thrive without burning out. So grab a pen, get comfortable, get a cozy beverage, and let's dive into today's conversation on asking for help in professional settings with my guest, Dan Roth. Remember, we're here live, so don't hesitate to drop your questions in the chat as we go along. So let's get started on this amazing journey together.
Step out of the shadows, feel the power rise, catch the spark inside you, let your spirit fly, beyond the chronic burnout, Carol Jean's your guide, find your steady rhythm, nice joy on the tide, forge forward, right and roll, leave the burnout far behind, in this journey hearts unfold, power's yours, seek and find.
I love that song. I can't help but dance every time it plays.
I gotta say, I have to take a moment to thank the Spice Girls for recording it.
It's just so me, though.
It really is. It's the you that everybody knows on the outside. It's different than the you that I know a little bit. Thank you for oh man, it's a morning. Thank you for having me on. Before we get started, for those that are in the audience, this is a ADHD, anxiety, depression safe space. Carol Jean mentioned about asking questions. If for whatever reason you don't feel comfortable asking publicly, feel free to send me a DM. I'm sure the same could be said without speaking for you.
Always.
And then if there's any accessibility concerns or issues, please let me know and I'll do my best to accommodate.
Absolutely. Same here. Always looking for how can we provide access and success enablers that work for all of us so that we can come together in community and connection and conversation, because that's what this is all about.
Yeah. And real quick, for those that notice my background, and I would have done a better job setting up if my daughter hadn't woke me up at 4:50 this morning.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. The rainbow butterfly is actually the symbol for women's ADHD. So if you're not familiar with that, that is the symbolization. My daughter has ADHD. My other daughter has autism. So I try to represent that the best I can in these spaces, especially with people like you that I'm so close to, I've known for so long, and know that we're trying to build a more positive future.
Absolutely. And when you popped on and you turned it on, I mean, just my heart got so happy because I'm like, oh, it's the butterflies. I love it. Because you guys know I've already got my butterflies. And seeing our ADHD rainbow butterfly always sparks my joy. So guys, today is World Kindness Day. And this is one of the things that, my friend Nancy Boudry was talking on LinkedIn this morning about kindness and World Kindness Day. And for me, the immediate first thing I thought about is, I'm kind to myself first. But I can't say that was always the way that I approach kindness. I always thought, it's external. I have to be kind to other people. But when I really started to take this journey and really learned more about my brain, learned more about my body and all of the neurodistinct, beautiful things that I am, I was like, oh man, I am not ever kind to myself. So today it felt really good because I've been struggling a lot with my health and things. And so I started with, I'm going to be kind to me first. And so being kind to me today with I was having a bad hair day, and y'all know I wear some hair extensions. So to have the hair that you bought that's supposed to be good not behave was not so fun. So I was like, okay, fine. What can I do to be kind to myself today? Because I was like, I want to feel good, because I'm going to be on camera. I'm going to be there with my friend. And I was like, I'm putting on something sparkly. I'm going to be kind to myself. And I'm also just I stopped for a second. I put my hands on my heart and I went, doesn't matter. Your hair can be however you want. You're just going to be kind to you because you're doing the best you can do today. So how are you being kind to yourself today?
Oh, that's a question of me.
Well, but also everybody, but also to you.
Yeah, but also the audience. And
yeah,
when you brought this up, I sort of cringed. And I'm going to get very meta right off the bat. Growing up with ADHD.
This is why we're friends.
Yeah. Growing up with ADHD, being bullied, having language processing disorder, I'm very, very bad with self-love to the point where even to this day, I don't know that I could tell you I love myself. So when it comes to being kind to yourself, I already know that I'm my own worst critic. I already look at what's happened the last 2 years with the layoffs and with how hard I've had to work and how much stress it's put on my family. And even though, in the back of my mind, I know it's not all my fault, you're still hard on yourself. So I think if I had to say something I do to be kind to myself, I work out on Peloton 5 to 7 times per week. That's really the only time I take for me. Everything else is really dedicated to creating a better world for my wife and children. So it's hard. It's hard when you realize that you have to be actively conscientious about being kind to yourself. It's not, it's hard to realize it's a learned behavior for some and not a natural thing.
Oh, it definitely was not. It feels so counterintuitive. And it's still this process for me of learning because I was so mean and so hard on myself for so long, and as ADHDers, we receive more negative feedback earlier in life, by 20,000. My friend Jen's in the audience. Hey, Jen, my other ADHD bud. And she and I were talking about this not too long ago. And it's yeah, that really does shape how we talk to ourselves and whether we allow kindness. And it's like, then there's like this visceral, I don't know about you, Dan, there's like this visceral physical uncomfortableness that happened with for me up until, really recently within the last 2 or 3 years, that someone being kind to me, I was like, no, 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 please don't do that. Like I would feel it. And it was just like the worst feeling.
Well, I think part of it is that, and I don't like utilizing the term we, because I acknowledge that everybody's ADHD is different. But one thing I can say is that I know most of the ADHDers I know have two things. One is that they're hypersensitive, whether we want to admit it or not. But the other is that we go out of our way to be people pleasers and accommodators. And I don't know many ADHDers that are not empaths. So we put this all out there and we genuinely expect nothing in return. But people aren't used to that. So even when we're trying to be organically or naturally ourselves, we often get hit back with this roadblock of people will block us or people will stop talking to us because they don't believe that either we're being real or we're being too intense for their, I'll use delicate or fragile psychological ecosystem. I'm trying to be smart for being up at 4:50, but that's why I have strong coffee.
Listen, I love that. I love that. There's just, we show up, we do what we do with what we have, and that is always enough. Absolutely always enough. I think there's just so many different elements to that. And I think as we move into our conversation today around asking for help in professional settings, one of the topics that is part of an optimum steady state, and it's the main highlight in this month's newsletter of the Recharge, is belonging, and belonging in professional settings. And I felt like, Dan, for our conversation today and just knowing you and other conversations we've had together, I feel like asking for help in a professional setting, this has to happen. This has to be happening in some degree of belonging and that belongingness. What are your thoughts on this, or what do you think about this?
It's something that doesn't happen, that actively needs to change. But companies are not allowing it to. And here's what I mean. The reality is that I had to start working from home, not because I'm not okay with workplaces, but because I was constantly looking over my shoulders. People were not accepting me for me. And not only did it mentally devastate me, I wound up having overactive bladder because I was so anxious and so stressed out that it physically affected me as a person. And as we look at things from an ADHD, or we'll just call it neurodiverse perspective, every part of the process has stress, from the application process to the cover letters. Like, people don't understand how hard cover letters are mentally for somebody that is so analytical and so conscientious about every single word and how they come across. And then you go in and you say, well, can I vouch? Can I push for my own values? Can I tell people that I have a disability, can ask for accommodations? And then you face bias. And then you get into organization and you face bias there, and people don't understand the difference between reasonable and non-reasonable accommodations. And one of the things that it showed us over the last 5 years and I was part of this, I was laid off in 2023 and I was a leader at my former company when it comes to the diversity space, is that the US culture has a tendency to weaponize terms and weaponize hope in order to create what they want. So it's the furthest thing from inclusive. And I just look at these return to work mandates and I think, what do you do? That's so immoral. It's so unethical. If the goal of a company is to have the most success with its individual employees and build the most, why would you put them in a position that's causing them the greatest stress? They're not going to they're not going to act to their optimal level. So there's a lot to be said for inclusion and belonging, but and I may be overgeneralizing, I would say the bulk majority of US companies do not believe in the values that they portray to the public.
I see it all the time. And the way that spaces, and I mean, just like you said, even if we talk it from the place of like employment branding, from what type of job description did you put out in the first place? Was it meant and was it crafted with intention to attract a variety and a breadth of people, or was it so narrow and so specific and so biased that you're not opening up and really creating a space where people can belong because there's no diversity. There's
There-
no inclusion. There's no thought from the very beginning. What are some ways that you have found or that you believe are some of the structural or organizational like first steps to start creating belonging in our professional spaces?
So it's a great question, and it starts. There's a level of granularity that starts, and if we're talking about it from a job seeker's perspective, the first thing I tell them to do is don't reach out to the recruiter, reach out to the person in the role. But from organizational perspective, if I'm running operations, and really I'm not into recruitment anymore, I really am an organizational facilitator, strategist, people operations, the whole nine yards. Is I look at the L&D and onboarding process, because what a lot of people don't realize is that companies don't create their own L&D. They don't create their own onboarding. What they do is they select a vendor, whether it's Absorb LMS or one of these others, and they basically have a list of different videos and onboarding things that they could pick up, or they could create their own and upload it. But they're not looking at it from the perspective of diversity, of belonging. So a lot of times what you have is either visually there's a significant lack of diversity within the actual onboarding programs. There's a gamification of cultural and racial values. There's a lot of barriers of entry, and it's just now that we're starting. I do not get paid by this brand. I don't work for them. Just now we're starting to see organizations like I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of the full POCstock.com, which is a website that has stock images of POC, by the BIPOC community, that we start to see some of that. So once you get that L&D perspective, and that takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, and a lot of companies are having to restart that. Now it's training for managers, because they could go through whatever they want, but neurodiversity specifically is so still misunderstood that there's a lot of gaslighting that's happening just from a managerial level. So they need to be trained. We need to then look at their managers and do high level executive. We need to work with our employee resource groups to build resources that guarantee representation during interviews. We need to expand those ERGs for even the most minute communities. Like I look at Indigenous population, which is not a very highly represented within corporations in the United States. And Indigenous is almost always overlooked when you're focusing on building up a platform for individuals and for groups. And then there's a level of intersectionality. So the barriers to create belonging are just so extemporaneous. What I really wish, and I'll close it out. I know I talk a lot, is that one of the best things I did for myself, and I wish companies would do this, is I went through diversity, belonging, facilitation training. And I did it with Veritas Culture, which is the #1 accredited in the US. But I didn't do it to get the certification. I did it to look at things from a different perspective. And I wish that companies would put their high level managers in there, because then that gives them the background to branch down and start teaching within those respects. So there's so much to this belonging and inclusion piece. Uh, but to cap it off, I would say that talking about it is not a bad thing. And right now, especially with certain events that have happened in the last week or two, a lot of people, and I can't argue with them, feel that they have to go back to being silent.
Yeah. One of the things that I always have the biggest issue with is companies will focus on that first 90 days of onboarding. And then it's like anything after that, just you're on your own. And to me, that is number one, doing a disservice to who you have hired. It's doing a disservice to your company, but everyone learns and processes at a different rate and a different speed. Number one, most onboarding programs are not accessible. They don't include a variety of learning styles. They don't include different access to the information. For me, one of the things that I do in my program and platforms, I make sure people have access to Bionic font and Open Dyslexic font. And do you need to hear it? Do you need to see it? Do you need to have it heard and seen at the same time? Because everybody processes differently. And I have yet to see an onboarding program that includes those and that goes beyond the 90 days in a really supportive manner with intention of retention and engagement.
So, first of all, the Bionic and Dyslexic fonts, that's something new to me that I'll be incorporating thanks to you. And in reality, what you're talking about is to see a system. That's what I do. That's what I'm best at. Unfortunately, I'm not in a position to do it right now. What I would, I had something I was going to, what I would say, and a trend that I am seeing, and this is a positive trend, is a move towards skill-based learning and improvements from employee standards. And the reason I love skill-based learning and improvements is because when most jobs, and I may be overgeneralizing again, do not take 40 hours to do if you're setting people up correctly. So if you set up 3 to 5 hours per week for an employee to have accessibility to training, to up level and upskill, but you're also paying them enough that they don't, because the concern from a corporate level is, if I help these employees accelerate too quickly, then they're just going to take their talents elsewhere to get paid more. Well, if we incorporate pay equity into the equation, that doesn't happen. Now you're up leveling employees, creating longer time within your organization, happier employees, and also more empowered employees. So there is a lot to it that needs to be included. And I want to say, to Jen and Diana and everybody watching, please understand that, a lot of times viewers are just assumed in these spaces with Carol, Jean, and with myself. I want you to know that you're seen and appreciated, because you're taking the time to pay attention to what we have to say. And that is very gratifying. And we appreciate you.
We absolutely do. And, Dan, I think that's one of the things that we can go ahead and dispel that fear, because when organizations create cultures and a sense of belonging, you can upskill all day long and your retention rate is going to be high.
Yeah. If you pay them.
So and if it's equitable pay, absolutely. If someone feels like they belong, they are valued, they are given a place to contribute, and they are acknowledged, we stay. Me personally, I would stay.
I think it depends. The issue that I have right now is just looking at the last 5 to 10 years between the recession and the pandemic. It's left a lot of question marks. I want to be able to say that in an ideal culture that I would stay, but I think people have been put in positions where they have such a high level of fear to the future that there's this constant or back of the mind idea that, well, if I stay here too long, then something's going to happen. I'm going to get laid off. There's going to be something else, and I'm going to jump. And that's not something that, as a company, you could battle, because when push comes to shove, if a recession happens, you don't know what you're going to do. You have to be able to survive. It's the fight or flight. So we do the best that we can, and that goes into, you know, as an ADHDer, I wish I could only do one thing, but now I'm noticing I have to be a specialist in multiple different areas. I have to have a passive income stream and build multiple components just to protect myself. But then what that's doing, and going into your area of specialization, is when you think and you realize you have to work that hard, that's opening yourself up to such high levels of burnout, but also missing out on things that you love. Like, no parent wants to feel that they have to work 80 hours a week because they know that they want to spend time with their kids, and they should. But if the only way to keep a roof over your head is to work that much, what are you going to do? Look, I've built these programs. I know how to operate them. I have everything in place to make them happen, but I also understand there's such a high level of variability that we can't control.
I love the research of Dr. Katie Milkman, and she looks at the power of both positive and negative thinking. And it's finding the harmony in that. And I think a lot of what we, as individuals and as, organizations who are leading others, and as we are future pacing things, for me, I learned I had to look at, okay, these are the 3 potential negative things that could happen. What will I do if that happens? And then what? And then what? And you just kind of get that plan out, right? Because it's the fear of what will I do and what if it doesn't work? But in equal reciprocity, for every negative thing, I'm going to come up with a positive thing. But I have a rule. I have a healthy boundary that I have 3 negatives and I will have 3 positives, right? No more than 3, because by the time we reach that, it's like a point of diminishing return. At least that's for me, right? Everybody has their own boundary there. But I think when we're talking about those types of things, it's part of how we can make better choices, how we can feel empowered in the moment to stand in our personal power of our decisions. And I think that gets left out. And I think that kind of leads us to a lot of what you talk about in understanding that challenges have a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we're talking about future pacing and the fear of things, if we have layoffs or we have recessions, what do we need to understand? What does this mean for you when you say there's a beginning, a middle, and an end? I mean, it seems like totally clear, but I know you've got more insight on that.
Well, it's scary because for me, I get judged a lot. I'm just going to be very honest with you. I've sort of gone away from LinkedIn because there was such high levels of judgment for me talking about my own experience, but also keeping the value of my expertise. And what I mean by that, for those that don't know, is I went from being bullied, making $30,000 a year, and within the pandemic, I found out, I realized who I was. I became somebody that people cared about. Did a post that generated 100,000 views and 1,000 comments every week for 2 years, built a large community, and then the Amazon layoffs. And so I went from this place of like really low to really high, to realizing my potential, to knowing who I am, to back right where I started. And now it's like, it's a position where people don't want to hear about the journey because I'm still supposed to be this expert in everything. And if I say the wrong thing, then I'm invalidating what they're doing. And so when I talk about beginning, middle, and end, this is part of that, because one of the hardest things for me to realize was that, things are going to be the most uneasy when they first happen. So in this case, getting let go from Amazon. And then right in the middle is perhaps the most difficult point. But once you get past that, even though it's still really difficult to see the end and you don't necessarily always know when the end is, there always is that point in time where things will get better. And I don't personally know when that is. I'm still $50,000 in debt. Um, I still have conversations every day with my wife about how hard it is. I still can't buy groceries for my children. I can't do those things that I want to do. But I know that things will turn the corner. And, for instance, I guess I'm announcing this here. Um, I got picked up by a speaker bureau last week. And for those that don't know what that means is I'm a professional speaker and I've been fighting to get more paid engagements. And I had a connection that um, knew the owner of a speaker bureau, and I had conversations with him. And I've been spending the last week getting all of everything, done and in. And that's why I haven't announced it yet. I just booked a gig to build a website for a synagogue in New Jersey that's going to give me a bit of a reprieve. Uh, there's things in the pipeline that you start to see like, okay, well, this is not luck. This has happened because I've put in every ounce of my being and fought as hard as I could uh, to get there. And I know there's a really long answer, but we just don't know when that is. And it's why it's so important to have people like you. And I have to bring up Tracy Borison, who introduced us. And I miss Tracy dearly. Tracy, if you're watching this, I know I'm horrible at keeping in contact. I love and adore you. Um, and those individuals that really, you could rely on. So, for me, being here with you today is self-healing.
Same. Anytime I have a conversation with you, even if it's just messaging back and forth a couple of times, there's so much that happens within me that just becomes something better, a feeling and an experience of I'm not alone. I have somebody that gets me and that I get in return. And that is just such a powerful experience. And thank you for sharing that. Yes, shout out to T.
Yeah.
if you're listening, woman.
Yeah. And I have to take a moment to accept what you just said because it's not easy for me. That's one of the greatest compliments I've ever been given. And I look at you the same way.
I received that, my friend. Thank you. There's one of the things when I read, when you were like, challenges have the beginning, the middle, and the end. And I was like, oh, yes, most definitely. And then I started to think about when I'm in the messy middle, when I'm in like everything is going in every direction. It is just total chaos and mayhem. I cannot see the forest for all of the trees coming at me at 900 miles an hour. And all my hamster wheels are firing, trying to solve every problem in every direction. For me, I noticed a lot of it had to do with the timeline expectation of like this linear journey that I thought it was supposed to be. Like the expectation of this is when this will end. And that was honestly killing me in a lot of different ways, in multiple ways, physically, emotionally, mentally. And I started to just say, well, what if I don't put a deadline on this? What if it doesn't have to be resolved by this particular time? Kind of like when we were in the green room and we were both like, just kind of processing everything. I'm not saying I have to do it right now. There was this place like all of a sudden I could breathe. What do you think about timelines or deadlines in this beginning, middle, and end? How's that shown up for you maybe?
Using a filler word there instead of pausing. to think. Don't do that, people, by the way. You could pause and not feel bad about it. But timelines are something that I struggled with for the bulk majority of my life. I always felt like I needed to get things done. What changed for me is when I was sitting there at age 35, still hadn't figured it out. Then my girls were born, and I almost lost my wife. And I always thought that there would be this moment that was a switch for me. And that's the closest I could come to like pinpointing the moment everything changed. It was that ideation of looking at a world where I had to raise my daughters potentially on my own if something happened to my wife. And at 35, when be spiritual, be whatever, if you will, when the cards were put on the table and I had to accept who I am as I am, that was the moment things changed. And the reason I bring that up is because when I realized it took 35 years to get to that point, and that I am a better individual and human being and have done more in the last 5 years than I did in the previous 35, then the way I look at timelines is if I have to get it done, if it's like a deadline for work, that's one thing. But from a humanistic perspective, there are not timelines that you need to adhere to. This world is not meant to force you into a box. It's not meant to put restrictions on you. And no matter how hard society, especially US society, tries to do that, it's okay to say and advocate for yourself and say, no, I need to do what's best for me. I need the timeline that's best for me. And people are going to respect you more for that. Like the reason I moved over to TikTok, the reason that is because it's one of those things that you want to be in those places where people accept you and know you for who you are and don't have those realistic expectations. And if they do, hit the road, Jack. Don't you come back no more, no more, no more, no more.
Ah, that's that's a powerful place. That really is.
It is. And I look at that. What I don't talk about is is the lead up to that. Because like people, well, what were you doing before that? Well, I don't talk about the fact that in the lead up to me having children, we actually put off having children because my grandmother had terminal cancer. My mother-in-law had breast cancer, and we had to take care of my mother-in-law. I don't talk about the fact I was in a horribly toxic work environment that called me 30 minutes before my grandmother's funeral. I rarely talk about the fact, well, I talk about it more about how my wife had a horrible pregnancy. There was no rest for us. She had hyperemesis, gestational diabetes, preeclampsia. We didn't get sleep for 9 months leading up to the kids. I don't talk about having postpartum depression as much as I should and going through that burnout. And I don't talk about the fact that it wasn't until I was 38 that I realized I'm a domestic violence and sexual assault survivor, and having to decolonize myself and have an understanding of that as things come up, because only now am I at a point in my life where emotionally I'm capable of looking at those things I went through and acknowledging them for what they are. Because as a society, we are so quick to brush things under the rug instead of openly talk about them. And that's why, and I know we're on the same page with this, that's why I am not the same father as every other guy in the world. It's why I build a culture of respect and understanding and vulnerability, and am not afraid to tell my daughters when I'm angry or depressed or sad. It's why they see me cooking and cleaning and break the traditional gender norms. It's why they're growing up in a mixed religious household where we celebrate all different holidays. It's the core of who you are. So, yeah, we were supposed to stick to an agenda. Like talking to you is not the easiest because I have such love and respect for you that I forget.
I
Yeah.
don't ever worry about an agenda.
Yeah.
When you and I get together, we just go. And you and I even said before we started, we're just going to have the conversation.
Yeah.
First of all, thank you. Thank you for being the human that's showing up and sharing authentically all of this stuff, everything. I think if we could have more of us doing this, we would have a much greater opportunity to heal, to belong, to find our way forward without feeling so damn guilty and shameful and feeling like we have to hide certain elements of who we are or our experience and how that changes us. And that it's not being comfortable all the time is not the goal. Sometimes it's being able to be uncomfortable and be comfortable.
You're right. But it takes more people to speak up, to be fearless. You know, I get emotional every time I talk about that experience with my wife. It is not easy for me to talk about being a survivor. It's not easy for me to talk about having an eating disorder and body dysmorphia. But what I've come to understand is that I still have the ability to do it when other people don't feel comfortable yet. So what it will take, in putting this outside of myself for a minute, is having more people like you and I and Tracy and Jen and many others that are willing to risk ourselves and our mental health, because people don't realize, like, when I just said talking about this is hard, there's a recovery process after this. I could speak for myself, and I'm pretty sure I could speak for Carol Jean when I say there's a decompression that occurs right after this airs, right after we have this, because we need to process. It's exhausting. It's beyond exhausting. But we do it because we don't see others that are. And we want to create a better future that people can be open about it. And we have our trolls. Trust me when I say we have our trolls. I'm a feminist, and men do not like seeing a male feminist. So
I love seeing it. So please keep doing it.
yeah, no, of course. So there's a lot to it. And
Yeah.
but that's why we're here. And that's why, like, you're my safe space.
Well, you're definitely mine. And that is what we work collectively together to create. And, the title of the show is asking for help in professional settings. And I think the reason that we are having this conversation is, how many of you feel like you can ask for help in a professional setting? Would you raise your hand if I ask this question right now? Do you feel like you can ask for help in a professional setting around any experience you've had, something that was personal, something that was big, something that maybe touched on some of the things that Dan has shared here today? Me personally, I've really been, Dan knows this, I've had a lot of health things come up lately. I have some co-occurring health conditions. I've been put on a medication that for my blood pressure, and it is one of the side effects is depression, and it has been severe. And so this has been a really tough time for me. However, it's the first time in my life that I have been comfortable to speak about it, because there are people like my friend Dan here who are sharing and modeling for me and for all of us how we can talk about the things that are happening. that aren't necessarily comfortable. But these things have to happen not just on social media, they have to happen around our dinner table with the people that we really love, who want to be there for us. And are we allowing that? And then I think by extension, this becomes part of the conversation we start to have and we create space for in professional environments. Because I don't think any of us should ever be in a place where we have to silently suffer when
And
we
we
are here for one another.
and we need to do it proactively. I'm gonna sort of go off the cuff here. Like, I look at things like menopausal rights and maternity rights that a lot of people don't think about until they happen. Well, you should. You should have those conversations because the largest percentage of divorces happen during menopause. Women go through and don't feel supported by their spouses, and that's a problem. And there is nothing like I hate when guys will say, "Oh, that's gross." Get over it. Like this stuff.
Define gross would be my next
Yeah,
question.
like
Let's
this.
really talk about it.
Like if we're really going to be partners, whether it's in life, whether it's in society, whether it's in love, we have to put our own insecurities down and have the conversations that are needed uh, to be had. And this is my duty. This is my responsibility, but this is my privilege as a husband, as a father, as a citizen of planet Earth. Um, so let's talk about it.
All of this brings us to a conversation that as an unidentified, late identified autistic ADHD woman, and trauma in my background that I didn't even acknowledge was trauma. I'm like, oh, I'm fine. We'll just keep going because I want to keep powering through because I cannot pause to acknowledge all the things that I'm feeling because I'm not really sure what it is because they're big and there's lots of them and I'm not sure what that is. So that's not safe. We're just going to push that down and just keep going with the agenda. And it became this external agenda of believing that if everyone else in my world, everyone else in my life, that they were okay, they were good, I made sure everybody's good, right? Then I could be okay, that I could feel safe, that I could just fully let out a breath. And that led to a whole lot of yes. People would say, oh, can you do this? Oh, of course. And then I would look at my calendar and it would be, back to back, full of stuff. And I would go, no problem. I'll figure out where to squeeze it in. And it would be where would I squeeze it in because I would remove myself one more place, one more moment that I might have just to take care of me, be it lunch or whatever else. I would remove it and put that in because I had gotten to a place where I was so unsafe in how I felt in my body and in my life that I didn't feel like I belonged here. I didn't feel like I belonged with anyone else and no one else felt safe. I didn't feel safe to me. And so everything I said was yes. And you talk about the power of saying no, and I do too. So I love that this is so important when it comes to accepting help because we're so used to saying yes that when somebody says, hey, and we might reach out or somebody might recognize that we're struggling and they say, look, let me help you. But if it's not the help that's going to really serve us or it doesn't align with our values or other needs or anything else for whatever reason, if you really feel really unsafe to say no when someone's offering help, how do we start to navigate this, Dan?
We need, before I touch on that, I want to say something. I want to thank you because I know we're coming up on the hour and I'm not in a rush to get off. I love talking to you. But I want to thank you for talking about the fact that you're autistic. There's still such a stigmatization. And I don't mean what I'm about to say in a negative way at all, but I still think that a lot of people think about autism and the interpretation is, oh, that's Down syndrome or that looks like Down syndrome and there's a combination thereof. And the reality is both are not anything to like. They're not disabilities, they're differences. And you speaking up and you being here breaks the stigmatization for so many people. I look at my daughter who's autistic, and you were the one person I could look at and be like, she could be okay. And that's really powerful for me, because as I learned, the fear is always there in the beginning, and then you realize, okay, well, no two things are alike. To answer your question, no is a hard word. No is an extremely difficult word, especially when you're a people pleaser. Uh, I think what I've learned is as I've gotten older is I will not take on anything that does not serve a purpose. And I've also realized that oftentimes you talk about people giving advice. Oftentimes people will offer advice because they feel a need to react. And that is a personal decision they make. It's not, and it's a projection. It has less to do with you. So when you understand that that is them, it's a lot easier to be like, okay, well, I appreciate it. Thanks, but no thanks. Or if you're doing a post on social media, hey, these are exactly the things I'm looking for. One of the worst things that happens that I see all the time, and it's happened with me, is you ask people for help and they have this idea. They're like, oh, I could put you in contact with, da, 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 da. But they don't actually think about, can this person actually help them? So you get 1,000 people reaching out and maybe 5 can help. Well, that other 995 people is giving false hope to somebody. That's a demoralizing experience. You see somebody like that, they're like, oh, I'm going to have a job in no time. Hey, I'm going to get support in no time. And then a week goes by. Tick tock, tick tock, tick tock. And you're alone. That's not fair.
No, it's not. I think one of the things that has really been a big shift for me is feeling good when I say no. Because I used to feel really bad, really guilty. Like I would lament over it. And it would just be, it would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. No, I'm not able to. And make sure I justified it and gave all of the reasons as to why I was saying no. Because I didn't think I had the right to say no. But shifting into this place that I am today, which as a 50-year-old woman in perimenopause and all the things this is, and in my beautifully, wonderfully wired brain and body, I can say no with a smile. I can say no with genuine kindness and compassion, and without the shame and the guilt in my heart, because I'm allowed to say no. I give myself permission to say no, especially if it's help that's going to help me over a cliff, not up the mountain.
That's something that I wish we would teach our kids more. That I am teaching my kids more. Even when it comes to playing with them, if they don't want me to do something and they say, Dad, please stop. Okay, done. Build it, because not being able to say no is a generational trait. It's a learned behavior that occurs over time. The same as saying, I'm sorry all the time. Well, what are you sorry for? You didn't do anything wrong. So many people apologize without reason. Parents apologize for momming and parenting. Why? Things happen in our lives. The more we start early, the better equipped we are later on. And I feel the need to include this when we do it, when we go to those lengths, when we say no, because people aren't used to it. At first, don't be surprised if you get pushback because people assume you're aggressive or you're being mean. That's, again, that's their projection, not reality. And I'm not going to tell you not to feel bad about that, because every time I get rejected, every time I inadvertently hurt somebody's feelings, I sit with it and it hurts me because my intention is so pure, just like your intention is so pure. But at the end of it, if you ask yourself, was I wrong in that moment? Can I sleep at night? And you can sleep at night, and you say, no, I was not wrong in that moment, then you have absolutely nothing to feel bad about. And honestly, Carol Jean, that's why I do what I do 6 years later. It's why I talk about anti-racism. It's why I'm a feminist and talk about women's rights and women's equality, because I have never, since I've been doing this work to the extent that I have, I've never put my head on a pillow and said, I did something so atrocious today that I just can't sleep over it. So, you know, I'll be me, and you don't like it, screw off.
I love that. As we say here in the South.
Oh, I had
to go.
Yeah, I had to put that like curve on it, because we've had such a serious conversation, and like I wear this purposely, think differently. I want to mention one last thing, and I don't plug very often, but I have a friend, her name's Elaine Lynn Herring, and she wrote a book called Unlearning Silence. And it talks about how we've been structured to be silent throughout the course of our lives. It's one of the most impactful books I've ever read as an adult. So if you're watching and you're going through something, there's two recommendations I have for you. One is take a look at what Carol Jean is doing. Take a look at her website. Take a look at her business. See how she can support you. But also, and again, I'm not getting paid for this. Like there's certain things that just have an impact on you. Look up Unlearning Silence by Elaine Lynn Herring. It's not a huge book. You could read it. It's easy, and I guarantee you'll feel less alone.
Thank you for sharing that, Dan. And thank you for sharing all of your work. You've moved over to TikTok more. Guys, go check him out over on TikTok. We'll make sure we've got all those things down in the show notes.
I lost friends recently. I lost friends because there were expectations of me that were unrealistic. Like, I've built my platform on mental health positivity, yet I share a 5-minute clip being vulnerable, and it's like, well, you're supposed to be the expert. You're supposed to do this or do that. Like, I'm tired of getting burned. And going back to your comment about saying no, I choose not to be in places where I am not valued. I'm not saying I'm not valued here, but sometimes you need a change of scenery in order to continue your work and be refreshed and bring that fire back. I haven't gone a week without posting on LinkedIn in 6 years. That's a lot.
Yeah, it is. That's massive.
Yeah.
That is massive. So if you would like more resources, more ways that you can start to step into what it is to be kind to yourself, what it is to embrace belonging, so that all of these things lead to being able to ask for help when you need it and really genuinely receive it. If you are someone has come to seeking support, seeking help or advice, one of the most powerful questions that I share when I do training with managers and leaders is ask the person, how can I support you right now? What would be best for you in this moment? Sometimes we don't have an answer to that, but sometimes that question alone opens up a place for us to be more supportive to one another. And that truly is where we begin to make this world a better place for all of us. Thanks so much for being here. Check us out at whittingtonwellbeing.com, and we'll see you on the next show. Later today, we'll be live at 2 o'clock in the chat box over on Beyond Chronic Burnout on YouTube with my guest, Courtney McDermott, where we are looking at redefining success from within. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for being here. It's been quite a ride. Energy mastery, let's turn the tide. Top shelf guests, dropping wisdom bombs. Join us next week, where the energy's strong. Beyond chronic.